Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chia, and in today's video I thought it would be fun to not only read the two books of my TBR like I did last month where I read the highest and lowest, but instead of doing the highest and lowest rated, I decided to choose two of the most intimidating books on my TBR. And it just so happens to have been chosen for this month's TBR because of the prompts. The two books that I decided to read in this reading vlog is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This one is a historical fiction. I used to read a lot of historical fictions when I was growing up, but I have yet to pick up one since I started reading again. Of course, I've read like some literary fictions with themes of historical fiction, but I do love historical fiction because I love history. I love reading about the past. I think history is very important to not repeat mistakes, even though there's some people who doesn't really learn from it anyways. But I thought it would be fine to start off with this one because I figured let's get the emotionally devastating one first out of the way. I actually already started reading it. I will give you an update after I talk about my second book that I'll be reading. And the second most intimidating book on my monthly TBR is of course Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. This book has been on my TBR for a while. It's high fantasy. It's completely out of my comfort zone. I guess you could also say both of these books are out of my comfort zone also. It's not necessarily like I've never really read them, but I don't tend to reach for them that often. I know Brandon Sanderson's magic system and his worlds are so in-depth and full of detail that's the reason why a lot of people love his books. And I've been meaning to pick it up ever since I heard about him when I first started reading. I've just been too intimidated to pick it up, or B, I've just reached for other books that are just more in my mood. But since the monthly TBR has prompted me to pick up this book, I decided to pick this up also. I'm hoping to find new favorites in these ones, so hopefully I can understand this book because I do want to move on to the rest of his world. And everyone says that Mistborn is the best way to start off with because of the fact that it has the easiest world and easiest magic system. Apparently it's still intense, don't get me wrong, compared to all like the easier romanticities and fantasy romances that I tend to reach for. So I am really excited to pick it up and intimidated at the same time. So of course I'm starting off with this. I've already gotten about maybe over a quarter of the way through. I'm on page 178, which is chapter 17, I believe. I heard so many amazing things about Kristen Hanna's work. She knows how to write gut-wrenching emotional stories, and I guess it's the perfect time to do it because of the fact that winter is about to be done. It's like the beginning of March, and so the way to say goodbye to winter is why not read like a sad book, I guess. I don't know. So what I'm reading so far is that we follow two sisters. One of the sisters is named Vianne and the other sister is named Isabel. They are completely different. They are not necessarily close because they are born years apart. I think they have like a 10-year gap. Growing up, they were sent to a different area to basically go live because they lost their mom unfortunately when they were young. They both dealt with their grief in different ways. Their dad basically like abandoned them and left them to other people to care for. The way Vianne used this to cope is to find somebody who she fell in love with, and they ended up getting pregnant when they were teenagers and ended up getting married because of the fact that she was pregnant when she was 16. So unfortunately she ends up losing the baby, and then like she ends up getting pregnant again like years later, and she has a 9-year-old. And Isabel has always been shipped off to different finishing schools and has been the rebellious one, the impulsive one, but at the same time the reason why she's always felt different is because she lost her mom when she was young, and also she felt that her sister was never there for her because her sister was trying to deal with her grief in her own way. World War II has just happened. Antoine, Vianne's husband, has been shipped off to war, so it's just her and her daughter. Isabel, on the other front, is in finishing school, but she's always been rebellious. She doesn't want to be told how to act in regular society and how to be proper, and she's always been outspoken. So she got kicked out of her last finishing school, and her dad doesn't want to deal with her or her sister. German soldiers have started overrunning Paris, so in order to get rid of her and to take care of her, he sends her off to her sister. And then meanwhile, her sister is dealing with not only having her husband gone, but now the town has been overrun by German soldiers as well, and she chooses to put her head in the sand. She doesn't want to do anything to get attention to her because she doesn't want to bring trouble on herself or her daughter. I am splitting my time between the audiobook plus eyeball reading because of the fact that these books are completely out of my comfort zone. I am already afraid. It's war. It's gonna be terrible. It's gonna be sad, and it's the reality of it, and I know this book is gonna put me through it, so we shall see how I deal with it and how my emotional well-being will be after this book. But I already have a feeling I'm gonna be crying, and this might be like a really top book for me this year, but we shall see. I will come back with an update when I get further into the book. Maybe I'll come back through when I'm like halfway through. I don't know why I'm so anxious to read this. Alright, coming in with a reading update. I'm about less than 100 pages away from finishing The Nightingale. I'm on chapter 33, so I'm about estimate 80% through, 85% through. This has been kind of a hard read so far because of the different things that both sisters have to go through. One of them is dealing hands-on approach to being a part of this war. Isabel is the youngest sister, and so she's always been the reckless one. She's always been the most impulsive one because of the fact that she didn't really have anyone to check her growing up. So instead of having her sister around to take care of her or her dad around, they both basically washed their hands of her and left her to finishing schools and other people to basically take care of her. And now because of that impetuous nature that she kind of kept as she was growing up, she's rebelling against the Nazis occupying France, and so she is helping down airmen and taking them to other places so that they can be out of France. There's always this sense of fear and danger that she's always going to get caught, yet she's still brave enough to do it because of the fact that she hasn't gotten caught. So I don't know what's going to happen at this point. And then on the other side, the other POV that we have is Isabel's older sister, Vianne. Like I said before, her husband went off to war, Antonio, and now it's just her who has to take care of their daughter. The soldier who is in Vianne's house, who has billeted in her house, seems to be standing on a kind of line where he doesn't know why he's doing everything, but yet he's still doing it. And then it's getting dangerous and dangerous more by the day, and the things they are having to go through, and also the fact that she's not only worried about her husband, worrying about the well-being of her daughter, worried about the well-being of a best friend that lives right next door to her because her best friend happens to be a Jew. And so all of these things are happening. It's very fearful because of the fact that they're trying to figure out where they stand in this war. So it's a very harrowing story. It's a lot of stuff that a lot of real people had to deal with growing up in World War II era, being a kid, being a mom, being a wife in this era, and trying to figure out where they stand. It's just so sad. It's so sad to see. I'm at the last 100 pages, and I just feel it's just getting scarier and scarier as the time goes on because of the fact that these soldiers are getting more desperate because of the retaliations that the Allies are doing against the Axis and the full historical things that happen, And I forgot how much I love historical fiction because it makes me learn about actual historical stuff that happens while reading a fiction. It's more digestible to me than reading an actual textbooks. At the same time, I love history. History and English have always been sort of my favorite subjects growing up. They were my favorite subjects in school. Literature, history, English, everything under the sun for that has always been my favorite. And I've always believed that if you do not examine your history, you are set to repeat the same thing over and over as we see that's going on in the world right now. I'm scared to finish the last 100 pages, but like I said, I'm almost done. Taking a break from the hard stuff that's happening in The Nightingale, I did get a little bit into Mistborn. I'm about 88 pages in, not too far along. I am tandem reading this with the audiobook as well. I used some of my Spotify hours to listen to Nightingale as well as some of this, and now I'm running out of my Spotify hours. The book is almost 700 pages long. If I want to read this in a timely manner, a video's not going to take a month long. I am tandem reading it with the audiobook, and I'm enjoying it so far. It is following two different POVs. One is named Vin, one is named Kelsier, and Kelsier, he starts off with being in this sort of, I guess you could say, plantation area, and he is dealing with these people named Ska, and Ska are the slaves in this world, and they've been enslaved under somebody named the Lord Ruler for about 1,000 years now. So Lord Ruler is apparently very cruel and tough, and they are under strict rules and everything, and they are whipped if they don't follow these rules. There's a magic system called misting in here, and the misting, people can use one ability, and that's the only ability they have. But for Mistborns, which is what Kelsier is, he can ingest different metals and use those different metals to affect different abilities. So that's my understanding of it so far, but I am liking it so far. What I'm noticing from Brandon Sanderson's work is that he is very cut and dry with his writing. There's nothing flowery about it. There's no in-depth descriptions of things or very lyrical writing. It's just, oh, this is how it is, which I like because I've tried to read very high fantasies in the past before, and because of the fact that they went on to describe certain things a lot, whether they're using metaphors or very descriptive writing and kind of hard and goes over my head a little bit. So that's why I've always kind of avoided epic fantasies. And sometimes when the world building is so long, you just get kind of bored a little bit. But this one, I understand the world pretty well from what we've been explained to by Brandon Sanderson's writing. So I'm liking it so far. And I'm liking the fact that it's sort of having a heist feeling. Kelsier escaped from like this place called the Pit because he was caught a long time ago doing I don't know what. During this point, they also took his wife away from him and unfortunately unalived her. So he found a way to escape from the Pit, and now he wants to do a huge heist that will try to overthrow the government basically. And I'm excited to go into it a little bit more. I will be back when I finish Nightingale. I'm probably gonna read the last pages on camera to see my reaction, so come along and see how heartbroken I will be. But here we are. Page 370, chapter 34. I'm just feeling bad for our female main characters right now. Like, I feel bad for both of them. They're both in such bad situations, and it's just sad. It's just really sad. Hi friends, it's been a few days, but I did finish The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I needed a few days to, recuperate after all the emotional wreck that I was after. Ending was really sad. There was a bunch of different things that culminated to make things even more sad for these characters, and there was sort of a couple of plot twists that we ended up seeing. It revealed certain character depth or character choices that one of the characters made, obviously, that I figured was one of the choices made of the character. We thought one character was completely one-dimensional, where two characters saw them a certain way, and it was so great to see that kind of choice was being made. I had a feeling there was more to the story than what we were being told, but when that happened, I really was like a little bit shocked and also a little bit happy. But then as the kind of like chapters went on after that chapter, it just started getting more sad. Isabel started making more choices that started helping more people in Paris when she was there, more people who were affected by the war, who were fighting in the war. Basically, Isabel started helping with a organization where they were trying to help these fallen airmen escape so that the German soldiers couldn't find them. The thing that I didn't really like about Isabel is the fact that it seemed, or she only saw basically like all the heroic stuff that she was doing rather than the consequences. Every single time someone told her to be careful about this kind of choices because of the fact that the German soldiers were actually really punishing people for everything they were doing. They were imprisoning people, they were sending them to labor camps just because of like their beliefs and everything. But yet, since she thought that she was doing a bunch of heroic things, she would never get touched. And I just felt like she was kind of arrogant at that point, knowing that she was being heroic, yet she didn't really think the consequences were really there for her personally. And when things started going down at the end of the book, and it just started getting rougher and rougher to read, there was just so much that they were going through. And also, her sister Vianne, also, she was going through a lot of stuff too when she was, excuse me, hold on. I thought I had to sneeze, but I didn't. I hate that. Vianne was also going through her own struggles. Granted, she wasn't being as active with her heroics as Isabel was, but she was still making choices to help out certain people over in the town, and she was still making choices that were also putting herself in danger. And she kind of went through a situation where she just couldn't let things go by anymore, that she couldn't just sit back and not do anything anymore because she was too scared of the fact that not only she would get punished, but mainly her daughter. She was more worried about like what would happen to her daughter, so she wanted to stay quiet. But the things that she saw were being done to her friends, her neighbors, her townsfolk, everything they were doing, that they were basically basically taking away her home, and she couldn't stand by and do it anymore. So she started helping out with like a little operation that was also happening in the town. And then also the plot twist, like I said at the end of the book, was like what made me start bawling. We had points and chapters where we were flipping back and forth from 1995 to World War II. And so in 1995, we're basically following a mom who was getting put into a home. Her son was trying to talk her out of it, but she wanted to be put in a home because she was already starting to die from cancer. And so she didn't want her son basically to watch her deteriorate. She wanted him to remember her as she is now, as strong as she is now, compared to her slowly dying. She didn't want that for him, so she asked to be put in a home, and she was getting prepared to go. This person was invited to go back to Paris for like a little World War II commemoration that they were doing for the people who kind of helped out. We had like 4 chapters taking place in 1995 with this person. I had to take a couple of days to put everything down because it was just so heavy. All the stuff they were going through and everything that they had to deal with was so heavy, and the stuff that the women had to be put through. When I was reading this, what I felt during my experience was that yes, I knew about World War II. We all learned it in school. We all learned about the terrible things that happened to Holocaust victims and the people who lived in these towns who were being affected by their neighbors getting thrown into concentration camps and everything. But when you're reading a fiction book told by 2 perspectives, being like completely in the war and seeing what they were going through and how, yes, it's based on like a fictional story, their actual people went through these things that were happening in the book. You know that people had these experiences. You know that women went through these experiences when they were going through this stuff. It makes it more real. Not that the war wasn't real. We all knew that. It's just it makes it more real and also gives you a different perspective reading from a fiction standpoint. That's why I always loved historical fictions like this that takes place during like really tough times in history, during wars that are happening, during famines, during like really tough points in history where lots of people got unalived, unfortunately. It's easy to like, you know, take a step back. Well, at least for me, where you don't really see the full emotional turmoil that like a lot of people went through. But when you read fictions like this, you see what they were going through. You see every single detail. You feel like you were there. That's what I loved about this book, is that the reason why it was so hard for me to read some chapters is because it felt like you were the one watching them experience this and seeing them go through a lot of the things that were really hard. And it just makes you feel more for it and know that actual people had to go through these things that they went through. So I ended up giving this a 4.5. The biggest reason why I couldn't give it a 5 stars is because yes, there were a lot of sad points, understandable, but the pacing was a little bit off for me because I just felt like some points we were focusing too many chapters on one sister, and then because of that I felt like it was a little bit boring at points because they were going through the details. I expected that with historical fiction because it has to lay down exactly what happened in history. But other than that, this was a perfect book, and I am ready to read a lot more of Kristen Hanna's books, but I'll probably take a break a little bit for a few months because this was a really emotionally heavy. She makes it really easy for you to go in here and fall into the story and understand what's going on, and it makes you feel for the characters right away. Also, I really did like the character growth on Vianne's part because she, I think I mentioned this before, that she chose to do a lot of things where she kept trying to bury her head in the sand. Like especially in the beginning of the book, she kept telling her husband before he went off to war that the war was not going to affect them, and then unfortunately he broke the news to her that he had to go off to the war and help out on the front lines, and he was gone for a long time. And then next thing was her sister basically telling her that they need to do something about the war, and then Vianne was telling her that not to do anything because she didn't want her daughter getting affected by it and getting hurt. But her character growth, where she went through a lot of things where she chose that she couldn't just sit down and do nothing anymore. It just wasn't working out anymore, and she didn't want that example for her daughter. She didn't want to show her daughter that she didn't do anything in this war and didn't help out, that she was willing to just watch people who were in her town get hurt. And she started taking a stand. Unfortunately, that she had to go through these certain situations and certain experiences in order for her to get to that point, but the character growth was just really great on her part. Yeah, that was my experience with The Nightingale. It's weird to say that I liked my time with it because I loved reading her words, and Kristen Hanna's writing is absolutely beautiful. I understand what people are saying about it now, and I can't wait to pick up more of her books, but go into this with like expectations that it's not gonna be very happy, you know? Obviously it's World War II, so you're not gonna be happy, but there's a lot of dark stuff that happens in this book. I recommend it, but also be careful going into it. Since I did like take a few days break, I needed to go into something different that was not as devastating as that, so I did pick up Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. It's been a few days days. I don't remember what I put in my last clip, but yeah, I did pick this up, and you guys, I'm 289 pages in already and chapter 18. This is crazy. I thought it would take me forever to get into this book because, like I said, I don't really read a lot of high fantasies, so I was so intimidated and scared to get into this. I see Brandon Sanderson's like writing now. It's so easy to get into. I don't know what he put in here, but once you get started, you just want to keep on going, and that's what I've been doing the past few days. I've just been picking it up and reading a few chapters here and there because the characters that are so interesting, the world is so interesting. We basically are set where the world is covered in ash, and also they are under a red sun, and they are ruled by somebody named the Lord Ruler. He's been the ruler for 1,000 years, and there's a bunch of like people who are called the Ska who are under slavery under the Lord Ruler, and so he's been apparently immortal for 1,000 years. Like nothing can kill him. And we come across like sort of like Ska street urchins who are basically planning a coup against the Lord Ruler. We follow two characters named Kelsier and Vin. Kelsier has been in this place called the Pits for the past 2 or 3 years, and he managed to escape because he found out that he could do allomancy. And allomancy is basically this magic system where you can put a bunch of different metals. It's very like elemental kind of, where you take a bunch of metals like copper and tin and iron, and you could put this in sort of like a vial and you could ingest it. People who have allomancy powers can burn these tins in their digestive system, and they could choose which metal to burn to affect different abilities. But not every single person who has allomancy can use every single metal. The people who can only specialize in one metal are called mistings. In Kelsier's case, he is a mistborn, which means that he can ingest different metals and he can use different abilities based on those metals. Vin comes across this ragtag group. They remind me a lot of like the Six of Crows, where they are sort of like planning this heist to overthrow the Lord Ruler. And Vin has always been sort of like a loner. She's been a part of like the crime syndicate, like underground, for all of her life. She was raised by her older half-brother. He's been a terrible half-brother to her. He basically abused her. He told her not to trust anybody, and in order to basically teach her to not trust anybody because everyone will betray you, he betrayed her and basically forced her to stay under this crime lord's rule. She doesn't trust anybody because obviously from the example that her brother gave her, and so when she comes across like Kelsier's group, she doesn't really trust any of them. They're trying to really be nice to her, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to infiltrate the noblemen and cause sort of like ruckus in between these noblemen, because the noblemen are appointed by the Lord Ruler, and they're hoping that if they can cause like chaos in between them, start them from fighting and stop them from being like on the same team, they can start causing like a rift between all of them, and would that make them become unstable? Guys, there's so much details in this book, but yet it's not hard to understand. I thought that it would be hard for me to understand the magic system. It's actually really easy. So right now we are going through this situation where they're asking Vin to basically pose as sort of like a debutante, where she's a part of these noblemen and she's trying to get into society, and they're presenting her so that she can be sort of like the inner spy in the nobleman group. I wasn't too sure if I was gonna really understand or if I was smart enough to understand his worlds, but the fact that I'm understanding it and also really invested in the story is crazy. I love it. I'm loving it so far, and the characters are very endearing. They're funny, and like I said, they are reminding me of the group from Six of Crows, and I love the Six of Crows group. They're filled with flaws and they're filled with like bad past and everything. I'm almost halfway through. I'm not halfway through. I'm like 45%, maybe 40% if I have to guess, but I'm ready to fall back into the story, and I can't wait to see where it's gonna take us. In the beginning of every single chapter, there's like a little excerpt, and we don't know who they're from yet. I have a theory on who they are from because they're, you know, pertaining to certain things that happen that they're being mentioned in these regular chapters. It's weird. I'm trying to tie everything together. I think I'm trying so hard to figure out what's going to happen at the end of this book that I'm like picking up everything mentioned and thinking that's, oh, that's foreshadowing something. I'm really trying to figure it out. Oh, and by the way, Elend, something's going on there. The fascinating thing I'm finding about this book is the different discussions on some ethics that are happening. Kelsier was having conversation with his older brother. What is that saying? Do the means justify the outcome? What his whole entire motivation is, overthrow the government. Kelsier's older brother tried to make him see the whole ethics about it, whether that is it really worth trying to get the final empire to be broken in order for him to do all the things that he's planning. His older brother basically doesn't really believe what his motivations are, so we shall see ultimately. And I'm trying to figure out other people's motives because I'm like keeping on my tippy toes to make sure that I'm not fully trusting everybody. I've been thrown off by like a lot of like plot twists in the past, so I'm really always like trying to figure out what the whole entire situation is before things are revealed. We'll see if I'm right about certain things or theories that I have, but I'm really liking it. Okay friends, I have a small check-in. I'm on page 395, chapter 24, about a little over 200 pages left to go, but I don't know who to believe because Kelsier is so adamant that a lot of these noblemen or great houses or things like that are evil, but Vin is noticing more and more that they might not all be evil or believe in things. Yet from what I'm seeing, the only person who she really is not getting like evil vibes from is Elend. It might be that she just has a crush on him and that's what's like impeding her judgment, so we shall see. But I don't know, I'm scared because we're getting to the last bits of it and I don't know how this is going to end for the first part of it, and I'm scared for our crew because Kelsier just did something that could possibly bring bigger consequences later. I am noticing like the little foreshadowing elements, so I don't know if those are elements of foreshadowing and then telling us what's gonna happen later, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but I'm just trying to figure out what's happening. And then Marsh, I'm getting like a weird vibe from him because he doesn't really believe Kelsier on the things that he's spewing out and the ideas that he has. Marsh is thinking that he is only doing it selfishly because of like certain elements of their past, but I'm ready to finish this up because I have over 200 pages left, 242 I think, so we shall see what happens. I think I'm going to immersive read with the audiobook. I feel I don't zone out as much when I'm immersive reading. It says in the audiobook about 2.5 hours left, but I might speed it up. I find that when I immersive read, my speed for listening to the audiobook is increased more when I'm reading words on paper, if that makes sense. So last 100 pages, I'm on page 541. Crap is going down right now and I'm scared. Oh my god. Last few chapters. I'm glad we're getting a lot more POVs other than Kelsier and Vin. Done. That was not what I thought it was going to end at all. That was crazy. I can't believe that happened. I loved it overall. I really thought it was great, and I honestly think I will be giving this, I'm gonna think about it for a bit and then probably give you my final rating once I edit this, but I'm settling between a 4.5 or 5 stars right now, and oh my gosh, I haven't read a fantasy like this in a long time. I'm so shocked by it. I'm so flabbergasted at the stuff that happened in the last 100 pages. I couldn't put it down. I really like this book, and I'm so happy to be finally introduced into Brandon Sanderson's world. I'm so anxious to actually go into the next book. You guys pick this up. Don't be intimidated. This is so good. But that was the end of my vlog. I finished The Nightingale, like I said. I thought it was great. It was sad. It was such a good, really overall story. This, of course, was amazing. I can't believe I finally read this and picked it up, and I highly recommend. This is such a good introduction to Brandon Sanderson's work. I see why now everyone tells you to pick up Mistborn, because this was surprisingly so much easier to read than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to have to sit for like a few hundred pages, just like in Crescent City, where you have to go through a bunch of like world building and a bunch of like information dumping. I was so scared about that, but this was so easy to get into, and the world was so easy to understand. The magic system was amazing, and I liked the way that it was all written, and I love the little characters that we saw, and I actually really like how the characters were portrayed and how everything was more realistic, or as realistic as you can get in a fantasy world, you know, of the different consequences that could happen about the plans you get. Because a lot of fantasies that we read now, a lot of the plans always go so perfectly well, but some of the fantasy books are not like as realistic as if it would be in real world situations if they weren't dealing with a fantastical world, because it was dealing with very powerful like Mistborns, and how they kept commenting on how Vin was really easy for her to understand the whole situation, and I thought it was just going to be super easy because then it would be her and Kelsey are basically taking on the world with their crew, but it was just so much more than that, and I'm so shocked by a lot of the stuff that happened. I highly recommend going to this if you really want to pick up Brandon Sanderson's books, and I finally like understand what the hype is about, and I can't wait to move on to the next book. That is it for me. I hope you really like this vlog, and I hope to make more in the future. Everything a theme, like including a lot of my TBRs, because I'm really having a good time reading my TBRs, especially my physical TBRs right now. I'm having a good time. But if you want more videos like this, like and subscribe. It really does help my channel a lot, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.